Did you know that TIP stands for to ensure promptness? Well, on today's What Do We Do podcast, we're talking all about tipping, from full service dining, coffee counters, delivery apps, ride shares, hotels, even tip screens are everywhere, and they're asking for more and more tips. So how much is enough? When are you over tipping? And when is it okay to say no thanks and just skip the tip? Well, stick around. I'm giving you my updated tipping handbook for the holidays and to guide you into 2026 too. This is season 6, episode 7, and it's going to be a great show. So hit the subscribe button, give us a follow, and let's go. Welcome back to season 6, episode 7 of the What Do We Do podcast. I'm your host, Dewey Stephan, and I'm also the CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Great Lakes Wealth. Well, today we're tackling tip creep, aka tipflation, aka the tipping tragedy, aka the tipping point. That's right. One of the most awkward money decisions people face every single day. Tipping. Tipping used to be simple. A small thank you for a meal. Now you're asked to tip at a self-checkout for a grab-and-go coffee. And if you're like me, you're asking yourself, has this gotten completely out of control? And with the holidays here, the anxiety ramps up even more. Who do you tip? How much? You do want to be generous and appreciate workers, but only when appropriate. So are you asking yourself, do you have to just tip everybody? Well, today we are settling the score. We're breaking down the history, the chaos, and I'm giving you the rules for a clear conscience for both tipping in the holidays and into 2026. Segment 1 of today's show is called, Why Is It Called Tipping? Well, we're going to start with a little fun history. Why do we even call it tipping anyway? Well, legend has it that in the 17th century, coffee houses in England, they supposedly had small boxes on the tables labeled with the letters TIP, which stood for to ensure promptness. And so what they did was drop a small coin in there, and then the server knew you were willing to pay a little extra for faster and better service. So for over 300 years, the fundamental concept has been transactional. Extra money for better service. In fact, you were actually paying the tip up front before you even received the service. Now, does that sound familiar today? Maybe, but not with tipping. How about when you want to get in the front of the line, or there's something hard to get that you want? Well, today we call that greasing. How about I'm going to give a little extra money to see if I can get the last one? Well, that's greasing, not tipping. Same idea, but not with what we traditionally tip on today. Today, it's not about promptness or even service. It's all about guilt or default. So let's get into segment 2, the tipping timeline, from 15% to 25%. Now, let's quickly look at how fast these rules have changed. First, pre-COVID, if you had a sit-down meal, the standard for acceptable service was 15%. Good service got 18%, and great service got a whopping 20%. For everything else, just like coffee or counter service, there was usually an optional cash jar, and you threw in your spare change, and it was all manageable. Then the COVID era. When the pandemic hit, Tipping transformed overnight. It became a societal obligation. You were supporting essential workers facing health risks and economic uncertainty. Percentages soared. 20% became the new floor, not the ceiling. This was temporary, yet necessary, and a good surge of generosity. And by the way, I fully supported this move. But now, COVID is over and we still have the current chaos. Here's where the problem started. The generous habits of the pandemic era stuck, primarily because of technology. The new digital payment screens, the ones that swivel around on the counter, now have default options starting at 18%, 20%, or even up to 25%. This is the essence of what we call tipflation or the tip creep. Businesses that never ask for tips are now equipped to solicit them, shifting the burden of their payroll onto us, the consumer. We are tipping more people in more situations at higher rates than ever before. Now let's move into segment 3, the guide, when to tip and when to skip. So what do we do going forward? How do we navigate the tip in 2026? Well, the general rule you need to remember is this. You tip a person for providing discretionary, personalized service where their compensation relies heavily on your gratuity. Here, in fact, are situations where you must tip. Number 1, full service restaurants and bars. This is non-negotiable in the US. Servers and bartenders rely on tips for a federally defined sub-minimum wage. 18% should be your floor for acceptable service, 20% for good and more, and maybe 25% for exceptional service. And if you're not going to tip 18 to 20% at a minimum, don't even go and sit down to eat or drink. Just order your food and take it out. Number 2, personal care. How about hairstylists, barbers, manicurists, massage therapists? 15 to 20%, I believe, is standard here. What about gig economy services? How about food delivery, grocery delivery, and rideshare drivers? Well, again, 15 to 20% for their time, gas, and vehicle wear and tear. And again, if you're not going to tip, don't get the service. And what about hotels? At hotels, I believe housekeeping should be a minimum $3 to $5 per night. At a minimum, valet, $2 to $5 per retrieval. And the bellhop, don't cheap the bellhop, $2 to $3 at a minimum per bag. Otherwise, carry your own bag. Simple. All right, and as a big reminder, service fees are not tips. Ask where the money goes. It often doesn't even reach the staff. Okay, now for the controversial situations. And here is the great debate. This is where the tip screen gets awkward. Counter service coffee shops. If the barista just pours drip coffee, hands you a pastry, and smiles, I believe $1 is plenty. Or even rounding up to the nearest dollar is fine too. But it is tipping. So if they craft a 5-step latte masterpiece and remember your name, maybe 10 to 15% or a few dollars is the way to go. But the judgment really rules with you here. And what about self-service or minimal contact situations? This includes self-checkout at the market, paying for a takeout order where the bag was just sitting on the rack, or buying a single bottle drink at a convenience store. Well, my advice here is to skip the tip. There is no service being rendered by a person that warrants a tip. Don't let the technology guilt trip you. I hope this makes sense and you agree. And finally, here is when to never tip. Never tip highly paid professionals like your doctor, lawyer, financial professional, accountant, therapist, or even your kids' teachers. These are professionals with set fees. However, nothing wrong with a gift or a handwritten note to let them know you appreciate their service. Okay, now we're on to the bonus round. This is segment 4, Holiday Tipping Checklist. Now, let's talk about the holidays. This is a separate ritual. You aren't tipping for a single transaction. You are giving a holiday bonus to people who provide you with consistent year-round service that you rarely acknowledge with cash. So this is where you need a budget. Make a list of everyone who makes your life easier and tip them well. Your housekeeper or cleaner. The gold standard is the equivalent of 1 week's pay. Your nanny or regular babysitter, also typically 1 week's pay. Your dog walker or groomer, the cost of 1 full session of service. And your building staff, think your doorman, superintendents, or maintenance worker. This one varies wildly by city and your building size, but a range of $20 to $100 per person is common. But the superintendent typically gets a little bit more than the others. And what about the mail carrier? This is a crucial point and a fast fact. Federal regulations prohibit United States Postal Service workers from accepting cash or gifts valued at over $20. So opt for a gift card for $20 or less, or even a freshly baked treat, or maybe 2. All right, bottom line, and listen up because this is actually the golden rule. Always pair your cash or gift with a handwritten note. It makes the transaction personal, thoughtful, and elevates it from an obligation to a genuine expression of gratitude. And yes, cash is still king. When you use cash and hand it to the person directly, the worker often keeps more of it. And it's definitely the best way to go. In conclusion, let's talk about the future of tipping. The conversation around tipping is changing on the daily because of this new tip creep, aka the tipping tragedy. It's leading to 2 things: more consumer frustration, and because of that, thankfully, more restaurants are now moving to a service included model. This means they pay their staff a fair living wage, and they do raise the menu prices to cover it. However, this is arguably the way to go and the way of the future. But for now, remember this: don't let some algorithm or the tablet screen control your wallet. Be an intentional tipper, and when appropriate, be generous. Tip according to the service received and not the guilt applied. If the service is excellent, again, be generous. If the service is non-existent, then hello, skip the tip. And always remember what TIP stands for: to ensure promptness. Well, what is the craziest place you've been prompted to tip lately? Let us know in the comments below. And how about you share a holiday tipping secret that you have with all of us? Lastly, if you want to hear more about what I believe and what Dewey Do, about tipping, check out our podcast back in season 4, number 102 overall. It was called Tipping Exposed, and it's also a banger. Well, with that, I want to thank you for tuning in to another What Do We Do podcast episode. And as I always say, live your best life, be radically generous, a great big booyah to ya. And yes, this has been another episode of the What Do We Do podcast. And I wish you a wonderful holiday season and an amazing 2026. But we're just getting started.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general information purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or any specific security. It's only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risks and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.